Elias Tran, a humble high school teacher, boarded the cross-country flight with an appearance that didn't stand out much, a wrinkled shirt, an old backpack that had accompanied him through his years of teaching. This was the first vacation he allowed himself to enjoy after more than a decade of teaching. First-class tickets he had saved for all year as a treat for himself. As Elias settled into seat 2A, the first thing he noticed wasn't the comfort of the luxury seat, but the judging stares of the passengers round him, manned from the flight attendant who was walking up to him. Lead flight attendant Nora Langley, a sharp and poised woman, approached with the kind of authority that commanded attention. She glanced at Elias and immediately stopped. "Excuse me, sir, I need to check your ticket," Nora said, her voice carrying an unmistakable undertone of doubt. Elias smiled politely, pulling out his ticket. Nora barely glanced at it before raising an eyebrow. "This is for first class. Are you sure?" "Absolutely sure," Elias replied calmly. Nora furrowed her brow, then motioned for him to step out of his seat. "There seems to be an issue with your seating assignment. I need to verify this with the system. Please step aside." As he stood up quietly and followed her, a few passengers turned their heads slightly, some pretending not to notice, while others exchanged glances, sensing the tension. Without protest, Elias walked down to the economy section. Sitting down in the cramped economy seat, Elias felt the eyes of the passengers following him, some filled with curiosity, others with judgment, but no one spoke. It wasn't the downgrade that bothered him, it was the humiliation. His fingers hovered over his phone, and he finally typed a simple message: "Boarded, moved to economy. Flight attendant didn't check my ticket properly." A few moments later, his phone buzzed. "What do you mean you were moved?" Elias typed back calmly, detailing the situation. A response came swiftly. "Give me the flight number." Elias complied, and after a few tense seconds, the reply came, "Understood. Sit tight, this isn't over." Meanwhile, at the front of the plane, Nora Langley continued her work, unaware that she had just made a critical mistake. She went about serving drinks and adjusting trays, her demeanor unaffected, convinced that Elias simply didn't belong in first class. Back in the cockpit, Captain Daniel Hughes received an urgent message through the in-flight communication system. When he saw the name Elias Tran, his eyes narrowed. This was no ordinary passenger. Elias Tran was the owner of the airline. "Check the passenger manifest immediately," Captain Hughes instructed. His co-pilot quickly pulled up the manifest, and when the name Elias Tran appeared on screen, the captain's suspicions were confirmed. Captain Hughes dialed Nora on the intercom. Her voice came through casually, but the moment the captain's words hit, everything changed. "Nora, did you remove a passenger named Elias Tran from first class?" There was a long pause on the other end before Nora finally responded. "Yes, Captain. His ticket didn't match first class, so I moved him to economy." Captain Hughes's voice hardened. "Did you verify his ticket?" Nora let out a dismissive laugh. "Captain, I've been doing this for over a decade. I can tell when someone doesn't belong in first class." But Captain Hughes wasn't satisfied. "Nora, do you know who Elias Tran is?" There was silence on the line before Nora hesitantly responded. "No, who is he?" "Elias Tran is the owner of this airline," Captain Hughes said. The phone went silent. Nora's heart pounded in her chest. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. How could she have made such a huge mistake? Nora took a deep breath, trying to regain her composure. There was no way to fix what had already been done, and now she had to face the consequences. She turned back toward the economy section, her steps heavy with guilt and uncertainty. As she approached Elias, who was sitting quietly in his new seat, her voice faltered. "Mr. Tran, I made a mistake. I'll escort you back to first class." Elias raised his gaze, his eyes steady and calm. "A mistake?" he repeated, his tone neutral but firm. Nora's face flushed, her usual confidence shattering. The passengers around them were no longer pretending not to notice. They could feel the shift in power, the undeniable change that had occurred. Elias remained seated, his expression unreadable. He didn't move to go back to first class. Instead, he simply stared at Nora, waiting for her to acknowledge her mistake. "Why are you moving me back now?" Elias asked calmly. "You seemed sure I didn't belong earlier." The silence stretched between them. Nora knew she had no defense. She had made an assumption based on his appearance, and now she had to face the reality of her actions. The flight continued on, but the tension in the cabin was palpable. Elias sat in his seat, calm and composed, as the realization of what had just happened settled into Nora's mind. She had misjudged someone based on appearance and now had to face the consequences of her actions. The plane landed smoothly, but for Nora, it felt like a slow descent into the inevitable. At the gate, security waited for Nora. The senior airline executives were there too. Elias had already disembarked, his demeanor unchanged. Nora, on the other hand, was escorted through the airport in silence, feeling the weight of her mistake with each step. In the meeting room, 3 senior executives sat across from her, their faces unreadable. Nora had no choice but to sit and listen as they explained the decision to terminate her employment. "Your actions on flight 417 were unacceptable," one of the executives said. "You did not verify the ticket of a first-class passenger. You acted on assumption and publicly humiliated him." Nora's world crumbled in an instant. The humiliation she had caused Elias was now turning back on her, and she realized there was no way to undo the damage. After the meeting, Nora was led out of the room, her termination official. She felt like a different person as she walked through the airport, stripped of her title, her dignity, and her sense of purpose. Meanwhile, Elias sat in a black luxury car outside the private terminal. His assistant Lucas checked his phone. "She's out," Lucas said. "The termination's official. The airline wants to handle it internally before it goes public." Elias looked out of the window, his expression calm but firm. He wasn't interested in revenge. He simply wanted to send a message about accountability. As he thought about the countless others who had been unfairly treated by staff like Nora, he knew that this wasn't just about one person. It was about making sure things like this wouldn't happen again. As Elias's car pulled away, he looked out at the horizon, knowing the journey was far from over. But for Nora, the consequences had already begun, and the lesson she needed to learn was one she would never forget.